Hi, I'm Raylan Sandin, your host of Live Out Loud. This episode is from a Facebook Live that I posted several weeks ago when the nationally televised murder of George Floyd occurred, and our nation was rocked to its core once again at the brutality and senselessness that is committed in the daily lives of people of color and minorities in our country. This culturally sound and much needed conversation came also from the viewpoint and lens of myself being a spiritual leader and teacher in spiritual communities, and how our community particularly has perpetuated the messages of love, light, peace, harmony, unity, instead of and in replacement and in response to the tortured, traumatic, anguished cries of a collective group of human beings who have been brutalized and dehumanized for centuries. It is important for us to examine why we are so quick to dismiss, why we would fall back into bypassing of these deep, everlasting traumas that have been for so long dismissed and rebuffed, and the refusal, especially within spiritual communities, of sitting with and witnessing and allowing the voices, the trauma responses, the very realized and actualized lived experiences of noble, worthy, and inherently valuable individuals, and why we in the spiritual community are refusing to allow these spaces and conversations to take place. So I hope that this episode enlightens you. I hope that this episode challenges those beliefs that might live within you and enables you to sit within yourself and examine maybe those areas where you yourself have felt the need to rebuff, and the discomfort that comes up with witnessing and allowing and being a part of someone else's trauma. When we are unwilling to look at and honor the trauma of others, that is a strong indication that we are unwilling to look at and honor the trauma that lives within ourselves as well. So this episode is an invitation for all of us to challenge those beliefs, challenge that thinking, and begin to open ourselves up and honor the lived experiences and the brutalization of an entire race of individuals and other minority races as well, to include Native Americans, Hispanics, and others, so that we can then begin to collectively heal as the human race, and only then will we begin to build reconciliation, trust, unity, and equality for all. Enjoy. I wanted to share today, I'm Raylan Sandin. I wanted to share some thoughts today on some conversations that I've had, some things that I've seen, and some, things that I am learning in my own education and my own research of and witness of what lives within me in terms of the current world events, particularly with the events that have been unfolding recently around the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, the murders of Eric Garner, the murders of Tamir Rice, and the whole meaning wrapped around the hashtag Black Lives Matter, and just the entire intention of this concentrated effort and this opportunity for us as individuals, us as white individuals, to really begin to challenge the dialogue that we respond with to these events, to challenge hey, Giovanna, thanks for watching, girl. Hi, Haley. I really want to encourage us as white people to really challenge our thoughts, to really challenge the words that we say, to really challenge some of the statements that we make around this, because here's the thing, our white skin, our being non-Black, non-minority, non-person of color, of being white, Anglo-Saxon, primarily European, etc., of that lineage and of these cultures, affords us a lot of freedoms, a lot of movement in our lives that people of color, people of minority groups don't have every day. So for example, this morning I woke up and there was a post. Hey, Danielle, thanks for watching, girl. This morning I woke up and I was tagged in a post by a gal who's white, and her response, I had posted a picture comment on a friend's post, and her response to me was to send me this meme that was very patronizing, very condescending, and it was a picture of Derek Chauvin and the three other officers that were with him, with George Floyd, the three other officers that are just as guilty as Derek Chauvin, and because they did nothing, they stood by and they watched it, and their non-action towards doing anything about it made them accomplices, made them just as guilty. So she said, the meme says that it's not, this wasn't an activity of race, this wasn't an activity of racism, this was actually something that was diverse. I'm not kidding you. She said it's actually diversity, that there were a total of 4 or 5 individuals from all different colors, different races, different creeds, etc., that were on scene, and that the issue was simply an evil act, evil doing, had nothing to do with race. And what I saw was simply an excuse for a diverse group of individuals who were guilty of murder and guilty of singling out a man whose skin is dark and attacking him for no reason. I don't care that he was a suspect in check forgery or passing a phony bill. That was an accusation. But again, it points to the fact that we are not innocent until proven guilty. We are guilty until we prove our innocence. And let me just add to that people of color, people of minority groups are always presumed guilty, even if they prove themselves innocent. And many of them have. Let's go to the story of the Central Park Five. Those young men were vilified in the press. People were taking out this excuse of a human being who's in the White House now took out a full-page ad calling for their death. And they had always protested their innocence. Always. It took years for them to finally be heard by somebody who would listen. Well, there were a lot of people listening to begin with anyway, but finally someone who was in a position to really hear them and to get those wheels moving, where DNA proved every single one of the Central Park Five were not guilty, had nothing to do with the rape of that white woman who was jogging. Nothing to do with it. And we have people in positions of power, white power, power base, who are calling for their death because the color of their skin is a presumption of guilt, because the color of their skin has been criminalized, because this color of their skin has been institutionally and indoctrinally taught to those of us with white skin that they are guilty because they're Black, because they're Latino, because they're Hispanic, because they're from El Salvador, because they're from Iran, because they're from Iraq, because they're from Afghanistan, because they're from Pakistan, because they're from China, because they're from Korea, because they're from Vietnam, because they're Muslim, because they wear hijabs, because they hold religious beliefs, because they're gay, because they're transgender. So I want to start at the top here. I have a set of markers, one of my favorite set of markers. And you can see, for those of you that'll catch the podcast version of this, you won't be able to see it. But there's a diversity of colors here. There's a full range of different shades. I have at least 4 or 5, if not 6 shades of green, the same amount of shades of blue. I've got shades of pink here. We have shades of purple. We've got shades of gray. We've got shades of orange. We've got shades of tan. All different colors, different shades, different hues, different tones. I hear all the time that, and it's always from white people, it's from us, who say immediately, anytime race is brought up, racism is brought up, what is one of the knee-jerk reactions is to say, I don't see color. I don't see color. I honor people for exactly who and what they are. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. If you didn't see color, do you use markers? Do you use crayons and just expect that every single crayon is going to be a non-color or all colors are going to be the same? That's bullshit. We see colors. I see the colors in the background. I see the color of my skin. I see the color of my hair. I see the color of my eyes. I see the color of the print on my shirt. I see the color of the painting in the background. That's bullshit. We see color. One of the things that I've been doing to really hone in on my own education, to really challenge my own biases, to really challenge my own cognitive dissonance, that place inside of me that says, no, I'm not. I grew up around in a diverse neighborhood. We'll get to that in a second. Check out Jane Elliott. Her informative education and educational exercises on blue eyes and brown eyes, on angry eyes. It's a documentary on YouTube. You can find it called Angry Eyes. her interviews, what she says is, and what is the absolute truth, is that we must see color. You do see color. You better see color, because that is acknowledging the human being in front of you for who and what they are, for the skin that they walk around in. We have to acknowledge that their skin is different. We have to acknowledge that they are of a different color, because it is exactly the skin that they walk around in, the race that they are, the religion that they are, where they come from, their heritage, etc., that sets them apart, and that creates meaning in the minds of everyone else who's looking at them. It's not seeing the color that makes us racist. It's not acknowledging someone's culture that makes us racist. It's not acknowledging someone's religion or their sexuality leaning that makes us intolerant or makes us discriminatory. It's the meaning that we give it. What is the meaning that you give that skin color? What is the meaning that you give that hijab that is on the head of that female wearing it? What is the meaning that you give of the men who pray and face towards Mecca? What is the meaning that you give it? That's the crux of the issue. And especially for us in spiritual communities, if you're a spiritual leader or you call yourself a spiritual human being, you work with energy. Some of you that follow me, you're into intuitive development, intuitive awareness. I teach all the time. We are energetic beings. We pick up on energy. We read energy and we interpret energy. It's how we're wired. But it's in the interpretation of that energy where we can find fault, where we can be at fault. It's the interpretation of the energy. It's the interpretation of the meaning of what black skin is for us that creates the anxiety, that creates the tension, that creates the presumption of guilt. I will tell you, I have driven, so I grew up in a diverse, yes, Antonio, thank you. That's the point. They have rights no matter the religion, race, skin color, and other things. They have rights. Absolutely, we're all human beings, yes. But know this, that not all lives matter. The reality is, in this current currency of our world right now, not all lives matter. And that's not okay. That's another knee-jerk response to when we say Black Lives Matter, is to go immediately to, yeah, but all lives matter. Because it's erasing the uncomfortability that we have around how Black people are treated, how people of color are treated, how people of minority groups are treated, how the people from the shithole countries are treated, how people from south of our border, which is Central America, are treated and talked about. Because we're uncomfortable with it, then we want to hashtag all lives matter. Not all lives matter. That is the point. That is absolutely the point. It does not negate or take away from your life. But let me tell you, I'm in the minority that has the power base. And saying that Black Lives Matter does not erase or take from me, but it puts me in my place. And it's about time that we understood what that feels like and what that means to be put in our place. Because how long historically, centuries, have we been putting them in their place. How many of you, your knee-jerk reaction is to say, oh, I have Black friends. I have Black family members. I've dated Black men, Black women. It's taking inventory. Who of us walks around and says, oh, I have so many white friends. I have so many Italian friends. I have so many Polish friends. I have so many Asian friends. I have so many Latino friends. I have so many Hispanic friends. I have Hispanic family members. I've slept with Hispanic men. I've slept with Hispanic women. Do you hear how ridiculous that is? It's taking inventory. That's master mentality. I'm challenging you on this because my own thinking, my own knee-jerk reactions, my own innate responses have been challenged, and rightfully so. That's master mentality. Masters would daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever have you, take an inventory of what they owned, what was in their household. And part of that inventory was the number of slaves, the number of human beings that they owned, what their name was, maybe, what their performance was, what their jobs or duties were, and a rough age estimate if they knew it. It's an inventory. When you say, but I have Black friends, I have Latino friends, I have Hispanic friends, I have a lot of friends who are minorities, I slept with them, I've dated them, I have family members. You're checking boxes of human lives. You're taking inventory. Do you talk about that, about your white friends that way? Do you talk about your white family members like that? Hell no. None of us do. And if you did, people would look at you like you were a moron. Like, what is that? Like, what are you talking about? It is not okay to say that in response to your feelings of uncomfortability when you're confronted with a bias, which is what racism is. It's a bias. It's a defense mechanism that occurs in our mind, that our mind creates around a concept, a group of people, a thought that we believe is dangerous or threatening to our survivability, our emotional survivability, our mental survivability, our physical survivability. It is an indoctrinational natural mechanism that our mind creates around something. And we all have them. We all have them. Saying, I had a conversation with a family member about this administration and the comparisons with Nazi Germany and that mentality. And his first reaction was to say, I have a ton of friends that are Jews. I went to Israel. I spent time in Israel. Who cares? How does that bolster anything? It's taking inventory. It is a reaction to what's living inside of you that's uncomfortable with someone putting the finger on a point of truth, a point of discomfort and dis-ease that lives inside of you. Lean into it. But to excuse it away and start taking inventory is not, no, absolutely not. It just makes the point for someone, just made the point for me in his life. If your reaction to that is that you have to start pulling out your list and checking off all the boxes, I have a lot of friends too. But I don't go around taking inventory of how many are of this race, how many are of this color, how many belong to this subgroup, how many belong to this minority group. That's a bias. That's racism. That's master mentality. Do they walk around? Do you hear Black people walk around going, oh, I've got a bunch of white friends? No! We've got to stop it. We have got to pay attention to the words that we use. We have got to pay attention to our language. And we've got to pay attention to those things that come up and spew out immediately as knee-jerk reactions, because that visceral response is an indicator and is communicating exactly where a bias lies. We see color. We see color. We cannot deny that. And seeing someone's color acknowledges who and what they are, acknowledges where they've come from, acknowledges what's about them. So instead of denying them, denying that aspect of them, because when we say, I don't see color, we're whitewashing them. We're whitewashing them because we're uncomfortable. It is not okay. That is not my place. That is a human being in front of me. When we create the labels, we're talking about making meaning here. When we create the labels, instead of saying Will Smith is an actor, he's frequently called a Black actor. Denzel Washington, one of the greatest Black actors of our time. Why isn't he called one of the greatest actors of our time? Why isn't Halle Berry called one of the greatest actresses of our time? But instead, they have that moniker, that label, to remind us. We know the color of their skin. They're a human being. They're a man, they're a woman, they're a wife, they're a mother, they're a son, they're a brother, they're a sister, they're a niece, they're an auntie, they're an uncle, they're an actor, they're an activist. So we see color. We see it. What meaning are you making of it? The fact of the matter is that members of these minority groups have been criminalized because of who and what they are, based upon their skin, their appearance, their physicality, their heritage, where they come from, how they move in the world. They've been criminalized. Watch the documentary 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. It's eye-opening and it's devastating. It is the systematic criminalization of human beings of color because of the backlash and the energetic snapback of slavery being abolished in this country and their freedoms and their rights being given to them. And it was in response to the great economic threat and impact that that had upon the southern states. Without Black men and women and children doing their work in the southern states, the southern states went bankrupt. They had their own currency up to that point. They went bankrupt. So they criminalized their skin, arrested them, and then forced them into labor camps and put them right back to where they were, which was get back to work and working for us and know your place, because we're the master with the knee on the neck. It's eye-opening, my friends. It's eye-opening, but we have got to do better. We need to challenge the thoughts that we have. We need to challenge the things that we say. We need to challenge it. We've got to. I've had some fantastic discussions with others, and it's not my intention to elevate myself. But as I'm learning, as I'm shifting, and as my thoughts and beliefs have been challenged, and what lives inside of me is being illuminated, it is my responsibility and duty to speak truth to that. We cannot diminish other people and diminish their experience. There is an absolute experience of what it is to be a person of color. And it is not equitable in this country. Not all lives matter in this country. The playing field is not level. It's not. Economic playing field isn't level. Sociological playing field is not level. Not at all. The mentality of suspicion that is leveled on people of color, the power that we as white people have when we level accusations towards them. Thinking of the little boy Emmett Till, he was accused of whistling at a white female. Years later, like decades later, she finally admits that she lied about that. She lied about it because she knew her boyfriend would respond that way, because she had been flirting with somebody else or whatever, and she didn't want to get caught. So she knew the power that her skin held, and she knew the inequity that his skin held, and she knew she could level an accusation and it would get him in trouble and result in his death. They didn't just kill him quickly, they beat the crap out of him. His face was unrecognizable, and then they lynched him, broke his neck by hanging him and putting him on display. And his mother asked that his casket was open so that people could see what had been done to her child. He was, I think, 10 years old, maybe a little less than that, maybe a little older. A child. I have a grandson who's going to be 8 years old. I cannot even imagine that. All because a white woman accused him of whistling at her. Amy Cooper just leveled accusations against a gentleman who was in the park watching birds and simply reminded her that there's a sign that says, keep your dogs on a leash. And because she got pissed, because how dare he, because he's black, you're beneath me, how dare you tell me how to be? I'm going to show you who's master. I'm going to show you who's in power. And she spoke that, and she said, I'm going to tell them that an African-American man is threatening me. You heard it on tape. How many of us have had that live inside of us? How many of us have driven through a neighborhood or been driving down the street, and we see a person of color walking down the street? For females, it would be a male likely, and we felt threatened and we immediately lock our doors. Even on our car. I have to admit it, I've done it. I've done it when I've seen Hispanic men walking on the street. I've done it. Because of the meaning that we make of the color of someone's skin, of their appearance, of their physicality. And we assume their criminality because of it. Calling groups of people dogs, calling them thugs, calling them rapists and murderers. At the turn of last century, there was a movie that was made in the early, I think it was around 1920 something, called The Birth of a Nation. black and white movie, but it literally, legitimately promulgated all of this messaging that people of color were criminals. They were going to come in, they were going to rape your women. How many of you hold the bias and the belief that people from south of our border are coming in and they're taking over our jobs? Are you kidding? First of all, they're not even a job that you would want. I don't see white people going out and applying for jobs to pick fruits and vegetables in the heat of the sun all day long. So give me a freaking break. Many of you look down your nose at jobs working fast food restaurants. But it's your indoctrination that says that they're stealing our jobs. They're human beings coming to have a good life, to live the American dream, which is where your ancestors came from. Your ancestors came from other countries to here, and this country wasn't even ours to begin with. We were the ones who threatened, who killed, murdered, raped, maimed, pillaged, looted, set fire to, destroyed the Native Americans who lived here long before us, the millions of them. And we've relegated them to small pieces of land that they can live on. But then they have to prove that they're worthy of living on that. They have to prove their heritage in order to get special grants and monies from the federal government to go to college for free, which many of those documents that prove that they are Native American have been burned and destroyed purposefully, so they can't prove it. And we're asking them to prove it. And we've removed the proof because we've criminalized them. But that was us doing that. We did that. We've created this mentality in this world right now. We've created this mentality as white people that Black people are criminals, that people of color and people of minority are a threat, that white is right. We've created that. We are at fault for it. We have seen color and we have ascribed evil, criminal, guilty, less than to that color, to those people of that race, of those races. We have done that. And we do it every day when we say things like, yeah, but I have Black people in my family. Who the you know what cares? Who cares? If you're taking inventory of human beings in your life, you're part of the problem. That mentality is part of the problem. It's part of the problem. You do see color. If you say to me, I don't see color, but then the next comment that you make is, oh, I dated Black people. I have Black family members. I have Black friends. Then you see color. So which is it? You don't see color or you do see color? You see color when you need to take the inventory to prove, right? To prove that you're okay, that you're golden, that you're a card-carrying member of support. But when then the next minute you say you don't see color. So then that would mean that you don't see that you have Black people in your world. You don't have Hispanic and Latino people in your world because you don't see their color. Do you see what I'm saying here? We have got to pay attention to what we say and to the arguments that we form, because if we're arguing, if we're trying to justify If we're trying to justify, if your immediate reaction to what somebody posts that challenges your thinking is to go into proving that you're not something, chances are you are that. Chances are that lives inside of you, and you need to lean into it and say, what inside of me lives here that's creating tension and discomfort within me that makes me say these things immediately? Instead of saying, yes, absolutely, these lives matter, and this is a tragedy, and we have got to do everything that we can to support these individuals and to educate ourselves and to continue to challenge our own thinking. But if you're taking inventory and then you're saying that you don't see it, I'm calling out the hypocrisy. It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. And none of this is. And just like the inherited generational trauma, that slavery, that dehumanization has occurred and lives within the bodies and the mind and the cellular makeup of people of color and minorities, has that same energy of superiority and dominance and master mentality lives inside of us. Who do we think we are to rewrite history and spread the news that Columbus sailed the sea in 1492 and discovered North America? It's a lie. And if you knew who and what Columbus was, he is the criminal that we make these minority groups out to be. He was the very criminal that we make them out to be. But the people with the power have the power to rewrite history. And the people with the power have the power to rewrite their dialogue. And the people with the power have the power to adjust and reframe the exact issues that lie within their hearts and in their minds. And they have the power to adjust the meaning just by subtle change of language. And we do it all the time. And we do it because we want to protect our image, because we want to protect ourselves, because we want to portray something better than the ugliness that lives within us. I encourage you, fantastic book that I just discovered. It's been around for a few years. It's called My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa, I hope I get this right, Resmaa Menakem. It's an amazing book. It's about generational trauma. It's about the trauma, this visceral response that lives within our bodies. It lives inside of my white body. It lives inside of the bodies of people of color. It lives inside of every single human being's body. We energetically hold these thoughts and these beliefs. Own it. It's these contrasts of life. When we own something, do you know and understand that the cognitive dissonance, that tension of being confronted with the reality of a concept or the reality of a belief that is informing our behaviors and our actions? When we're in that space, if we lean into it and we own it, and we recognize that that tension buildup, that energetic buildup, is communicating that there's a truth here that lives here. If we lean into it and own it, that tension goes away. That tension dissipates. And we're able to see then the truth that lives there. And we're able to look at it and we're able to say and cry out, my God, forgive me, for I know not what I was doing. When we know better, we do better. When I was young, the conditioning is real, folks. When I was young, I love mixed nuts. I love to eat a variety of different nuts. And most of you probably know where I'm going. I grabbed a big Brazil nut, but I didn't know that's what it was called. I was probably 4 or 5 at the time. And my grandmother would have these bowls around the house, you know, candy and nuts. And so I grabbed one and I bit it and I liked it. And I said, what is this? Somebody from my family said it was the N-word toe, told me it was an N toe. I'm not going to say the word. So I'm a 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid walking around and I'm like, I love, and I was just saying it. So I go to school and I'm telling all my friends because I'm super excited. I found a new thing that I like. And I was telling all my friends about it. My teacher was aghast. She was appalled. She was like, we don't say that. And I didn't understand that. I was like, but it's a nut. Because that was the meaning that I was given and that was imprinted and laid down upon my impressionable mind. And she had a conversation with my mom. So my mom, rather than educating me and telling me why we don't say that and telling me what the actual name of that nut, that particular nut is, she just said, stop saying, you don't say that word. And I'm thinking, it's a nut. It's like saying peanut to me. So I'm like, what? So fast forward to early teenage years, and here's a mixed nut bag. And I'm like, ooh, I grab it, not knowing it's called a Brazil nut. I grab it and I say, ooh, an N-toe. And my mother and my grandmother and the rest of my family in the room, they were all aghast. And they said to me, oh my gosh, you can't say that. And got really upset with me. And I started crying at their reaction. And I was like, what? And they said, that's not what that's called. It's called a Brazil nut. So I started screaming at them. And I said, you're the one who told me that's what it was called. Why wouldn't you tell me it's a Brazil nut when I was a kid? You taught me that. I would never say that in the context of calling a human being that. In my child mind, I knew enough to know that that was a pejorative, a derogatory term to call a human being that, but I was taught and informed that the nut, that's what that was. Do you see what I'm saying? So when I was confronted with that, of course I felt ashamed. Of course I felt, I was embarrassed. It was horrifying. It was horrifying. And I should have been horrified. But I didn't know better until I know better. And then I did better. Now I know that they're called Brazil nuts, but I didn't know then. So then we change and we adapt and we eradicate those behaviors. The issue becomes when those of you who are challenged with the words that you say, words matter. And how you frame things matter. A defense against racism is not, I have Black friends, I have Black family members, I dated, I screwed, I slept with Black men or Black women. And a defense is not, I don't see color. Those are not a defense. Those actually point out that it lives within you. You don't take inventory of your other family members and friend groups by the color of their skin, by their ethnicity, by their genetics. I don't say, oh, I have a lot of blue-eyed and blonde-haired friends, a lot of master race friends, a lot of Aryan friends. You don't say that. That's not something in our normal lexicon. Words matter. And when we're confronted with these ideas and these concepts, it's a point for us to stop and take stock of what's going on inside of here and understand what it's communicating. when we're feeling that cognitive tension, that's our pay attention here, listen here, learn something here, grow here. It's not something to run from, but the mind makes meaning, and the mind makes meaning that things are dangerous, that it's a threat to the system, that it's a threat to my worldview, that it's a threat to everything I believe. And as long as I'm looking outside of myself externally for threats, rather than internally for what lives inside of me that's ugly, that's giving meaning to something and saying it's threatening to me, I will never grow and change. And I will always see the color of someone's skin as threatening. And to deny that is hypocrisy. And that's what people are calling out. And it's exactly what we, in our power, have got to call out in ourselves and in each other. Not all lives matter until they do. Until every single life is afforded the same equitability, the same equanimity of its divine nature, of its soul connection, of its source material, of its God image, then not all lives matter. Until Black people, people of color, people of disenfranchised groups, people of other sexuality that you agree or disagree with, people of other nationalities, people of other religions, people of other matter, not all lives matter. Not all lives matter. When we're faced with a situation that we don't want to face, and our immediate reaction is to threaten that human being in front of us because of their skin color, because of their creed or their nationality, or to go and attack and accost. Do you know George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin around streets that he was just walking on? He was walking home. And he was the threat. George Zimmerman was the threat. But he criminalized Trayvon Martin because of the color of his skin, because he was wearing a hoodie, and because of the meaning that he gave to that boy and his appearance. George Martin was a threat. Be terrified of the George Martins of this world. Be terrified of the white, angry men, who storm state capitals with automatic weapons because they're pissed off because they have to wear masks during COVID. Be terrified of those people. Be terrified of what lives inside of you that believes that you're superior, that you're better than, that you're elevated, that you're more than. Be terrified of that. We have got to do better and be better and understand that words matter, understand that ideas and thoughts matter, understand that concepts matter. Understand that the initial visceral reactions that happen within us, if it's anything other than, my gosh, what a horrific tragedy for that man and his family to be attacked and accosted that way. If you're defending law enforcement, you're part of the problem. If you're saying, oh, there's good people on all sides, you're part of the problem. If you're not actively calling out what lives in the hearts and minds of men and women that would create those situations, you're part of the problem. It lives within you. You're justifying, you're minimizing, you're defending. I worked in a sheriff's office I was a victim advocate. I advocated for victims of crime. I still do. I advocate for people. I've always been an advocate for anybody who's being picked on, marginalized, singled out. And I grew up in a family of a lot of people serving in the military. But I call that out. Not everybody that I know that I worked with in the sheriff's department were douche canoes, just like Derek Chauvin, and awful human beings, but there were some, and I called them out. We have to call them out. The fish rots from the head. We've got to be willing to call it out. We've got to be willing to speak out against it. We've got to be willing to check ourselves first and foremost and look at what lives in here inside of this container. If you're taking inventory, if your first reaction is to take inventory of the people that you know in your life who are of this particular skin color or nationality, there's a problem that lives inside of you. And it has to be removed. That's a communication to you that it lives inside of you. It's got to be removed. When I see white females being murdered by their significant others or their husbands or whatever, I don't go, oh my gosh, I have so many white friends. Oh, I just don't see color. I have so many white friends. I say, how horrible that that's happening to that human being, and we need to do something about domestic violence. Do you see the difference? Anytime when we're framing it in terms of the color of their skin and checking boxes, there's a problem. There's a problem. And then we say we don't see the color. But you're seeing the color because you're checking the boxes and you're saying that those colors exist in your world and in your influence of people that you love and care about. I understand that this is offensive to some. I understand that this is challenging. I understand it. It's a challenge to my own world. It's continues to challenge my own paradigms. The paradigms that I was indoctrinated with. I grew up in diverse neighborhoods when I was young in Denver. But when I was a teenager and I could drive, I would drive through an area of Denver back then it's still called 5 Points, but back then it's not gentrified as it is now, which is just a fancy term for the rich white folk have moved in and made it all pretty and have priced out the riffraff and the minorities who can't afford to live there. But when I would drive to go to downtown Denver and hang out with friends, I would drive through that area. And I remember white knuckling my steering wheel and all my doors were locked. And I drove pretty fast through those streets. Why? Because it lives within me. Because I was indoctrinated with the mentality that these people are criminals. Because it was a poor socioeconomic neighborhood, primarily of Blacks, Hispanics. See what I'm getting at? And when you look at criminal statistics, there's a greater chance for me to be attacked by members of my own race and skin color than there is of any minority, color, or group out there. So what is it that lives in me that reacts that way when I see that? It's been indoctrinated, and we have got to educate ourselves, and we have got to face it. We have got to admit it. We've got to understand it. We've got to see it. We've got to lean in, and we've got to heal that. And then we can do better. And then we can understand that Black lives matter. Then we can understand that Hispanic lives matter. Then we can understand these kids in these cages living in my state right now, they matter. We can understand the trauma that being ripped from your family, being removed from your homeland, from anything and everything that you understand and recognize, and being put into detention camps, internment camps, labor camps, which is what they were called in Nazi Germany. They were called labor camps, concentration camps, concentrating and localizing the dehumanized subspecies that were needing to be eradicated for the master race. We have got to see that it is such a quick slope that we go down on. How do you dehumanize people? When you say you don't see their color, that's dehumanizing them. They absolutely are that color. They absolutely are that color. So say that you accept them. They're in your world. They're a loving human being that's in your world. That's it. That's all that needs to be said. We've got to understand, and we've got to really lean in to how and why and where we dehumanize other people. And especially being in the spiritual communities and working with within people's energy, and wanting to spread positivity and love and light out there. And I don't want to focus on negative things. Well, our human existence, our human experience is about contrasts, and we often learn the greatest and the deepest and the most profound lessons by looking at and leaning into the contrasts of life. So in order to have that rich experience of what it means to be human, we have got to look at the contrasts. Looking at just the positive and just the love and light and peace and happiness and goodness is spiritual bypassing. It's a denial of what's real, of those things that live inside of us, of the shadows. And we've got to own the shadows too. We've got to own those contrasts. We've got to, because it's a part of us. It's a part of our existence. It's a part of our world. Nothing changes until we look at it, until we examine it, until we take it apart. Take apart the words that you say. Take apart how you frame things. Think about the choice of words that come out of your mouth, because they will always communicate what's going on in your mind and in your heart. Out of the mouth, or out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And words matter. I send you my love. I send you deep healing. We've got to be conscious healers about this. We've got to be aware. We've got to be intentional about how we show up in the world, and who we are, and how we respond, and how we speak, and how we frame things, the meaning that we give to events. We've got to be intentional about that. This world and what we're going through highlights that for us. These contrasts highlight the need for us to live with intentionality, instead of live by knee-jerk reactions, live by indoctrination, live by, automatic responses, pithy comments. I don't see color. and just pithy statements that are bullshit, that mean nothing. And in fact, they do more harm. My intention is not to no, you know what? I'm not going to even excuse it. If you're offended, you're offended. Great. I'm glad you're offended, because my hope is that you look at it. I have had interactions with people where they've pissed me off so much, and I've left those interactions, and I have then gone back myself and said, you know what, I need to rethink this. And they're right. And then I've returned to them and said, thank you. You've given me food for thought. So if I've offended you, great. I'm doing my job. If you're out there going, hell yes, amen, great. But I hope that you're also looking at what lives inside of you. I'm all about building conscious awareness, because it's what lives inside of me as well. And it's what I strive every day to look in my own mirror. These events are mirrors for us to look at and to see our reflection in. And that's what creates the tension. And that's why most of you are on high alert to just push the reflection away, because you don't want to see it. You don't want to hear it. You want to believe otherwise. But denying that it exists, excusing it away, trying to reframe it, trying to rewrite history and whitewash it, is not our place and is not helpful for anybody. And it continues to perpetuate these very real concepts of otherism and separatist mentality. And it's time that we lean in as white people, people with power base, and absolutely begin to dismantle the weapons that we use against people of minority groups and of color. Have a great day. Thank you.